Hello and welcome to another presentation using my S92 Interactive Systems Trainer. Today we'll be talking about the S92 fuel system. So clicking on the icon takes you to the fuel system page. We have a normal schematic for the S92 main fuel system. We have the APU control switch, it's the miscellaneous fuel switching panel and the engine control quadrant. We'll just discuss the fuel prime pump switches. Selecting the fuel prime pump 1 turns on the fuel prime pump. You get a fuel prime pump on advisory. Opens the number 1 shutoff valve and primes the number 1 system. This pump is generally used in maintenance, so when the system has been drained of fuel, to get the fuel back into the system, you'll prime both sides. So you select the number 2 shutoff valve will open, the number 2 prime pump will start, we'll prime the number 2 side. If you want to prime up until the engine low pressure pump, you select the number 1 into crossfeed, and you can prime that part of the system as well. And turning it off. Now often once the system is primed, fuel is always in these lines. It's just not flowing. It's not being pumped or it's not being drawn. So there is always fuel in the lines once it has been primed. To start the aircraft, you turn the battery on, I guess, in the APU. Switch on the APU will select either the number 1 pump on or the number 2 pump on alternate starts. So this start is turned on the number 1, the next start it would turn on the number 2. If when you turn the APU on you get a fuel prime pump fail caution, okay, you're not going to know which one it is because, as I said, it's selected either the number 1 or number 2. So either one could fail, you're not sure which one it is. So the fuel prime switches can be used to fault find. You turn on pump 1, you either get a prime pump on or a prime pump fail. If you get a prime pump on, chances are it's the number 2, you'd select the number 2, you should get a prime pump fail. So you'd isolate that it's the number 2 fuel pump that has failed. Okay, so going for a normal start, APU control on. Your fuel's control switches will be in crossfeed. And we'll start the number 1. So number 1 engine starter is on. So once you've pressed it on, you get a starter 1 on light. The fuel prime pump number 1 is already on. It's directing fuel up to the APU already. The number 1 fuel valve has opened, allowing pressurized fuel into the number 1 side. Now you're in crossfeed, so the fuel is going to cross into the number 2. We are starting the number 1, so idle on number 1. Once you select idle, the engine low pressure pump will start to spool up, drawing fuel from the number 2 tank into the number 1 engine. Now I haven't programmed the starter to go out at a certain time, so normally passing about 52% NG, the starter will go out and the aircraft or the engine will be self-sustaining. But to simulate that, we just press the number 1 starter again and it will go out. In the real aircraft, if you press the number 1 starter whilst the number 1 start light is on, it will abort the start. So now your number 1 engine should be idling 67% NG. Start the number 2. Starter's in, starter's on, NG will be rising, TDT below 150. Again, the number 2 shutoff valve is now opened, allowing pressurized fuel into the number 2 side. The number 1 was just drawing fuel from the number 2. Now it's receiving pressurized fuel from the number 2 side. Select the number 2 throttle to idle. Starts spooling up the number 2 low pressure pump. It's on the accessory module for the aircraft, the engine, and it draws fuel from the number 1 side for the start. Again, to simulate passing 52%, press the number 2 starter. The number 2 starter goes out. The aircraft will reach 67% at idle. Both throttles to fly. Fuel selector valves to direct. And eventually you'll be turning your APU off. And this is your normal flight configuration for the fuel system. Once you are in this configuration, the show cautions button will appear. If you press on that, all the associated cautions for the main fuel system will appear, and advisories. You can click on those and it'll take you to further information from the RFM just to show you what will bring the caution light on. Declutter, you can press that again. You can bring up the slide selector arrows by pressing the slide select button. Again, press on those. You go to further information from the RFM. So you can read up about the system. Again, to declutter, we press that and we go through a normal shutdown. AP will be on. Throttles to idle. 2 minutes of idle. You just shut them down. Fuel selectors to off. AP control to off, and you shut the aircraft down. Back to the home screen. That completes the presentation on the fuel system. I hope you've enjoyed it.